Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are, and welcome to the PYRESWAP show, sponsored by Pocket. I guess today is a pretty good day, and on Friday, it's kind of like it's kind of different. It's kind of different here. This show is at a unique time slot. It's kind of like the wrapping up the week time slot, and I guess we kind of have a little bit of variety, a little bit of we can be a little bit variable about what we talk about. There isn't really like any special set subject matter, and we can go all over the place. Now, the first thing I want to show off is these stickers. Here, let's see. I'm gonna put them right. Can that camera zoom from right there? Let's see. Is this legible? Let me think. I'm going to hold it right center. There we go. The highest real yield in DeFi with a QR code. This QR code takes you right to PYRESWAP.com, of course. And I'm going to explain. Thank you, Jeff. We actually have a full stack of them. You could say that I'm really I'm not going to do card tricks with them unless I bend them. Yeah, the Knight, I think, is losing his head over the deals we have going on. The Knight is just, his head spinning with all the stuff we have happening here. I think that it's quite possible that that our producer changes the Knight's head daily as his little Easter egg. I'm just going to say that. That may or may not be happening. That there are small adjustments that happen on set for the amusement of our producer. And I want to talk about the phrase, this quote unquote, this big bold promise, the highest real yield in DeFi, because I want you guys to understand this is not something that is just like an empty or meaningless word. We are talking objectively about a math equation. We're talking objectively about a math equation. First of all, I want to address something. You guys who are participating in Genesis, you guys know about something called a gratuity. Do you guys know about a gratuity fee on Genesis claims? Is everyone aware of what I'm talking about? And for those of you who don't know, the gratuity could arguably be considered not real yield. It's like a mixture of fake yield mixed with real yield. That's what we have going on right now in the incantation witch vault. And do you guys understand that the real yield is yield that comes from fees, a reconfiguration of fees, and that the gratuity is a mission yield. It's an inflationary yield. Now, I want to be clear, you guys. Even with the gratuity, you guys have to understand. Think about the Pyre gas getting staked on the other side. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the gratuity as being fake yield, well, then you kind of have to think about all the Pyre gas that's getting staked as being fake as well, right? Would you guys agree that the majority of Pyre gas in circulation right now is also emission based? Would you guys agree? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So even with the gratuity, yeah, exactly. Even with the gratuity, it's probably that there's a majority of emission tokens, that the fraction of emission tokens is higher in what's being staked than what's being received. Does that make sense to you guys? Or should I say reserved? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like from the incants, it's probably a larger fraction of that being yield than what's being staked to capture incants. Am I making sense to you guys? Right? It might not feel like it's fake when it's in your wallet, but you get what I'm saying. It's an incentive token at this particular moment in time. Everyone follow me so far? Okay, just making sure, because if you want to discount the gratuity, we can also discount the emissions that are getting staked. Just being clear. Now, there's a couple words that I wanted to go over, and I'm going to pull this more into frame and making sure that the glare is okay. One of them is numeraire. Another word is bonds, meaning debt instruments. Another word is current yield. Another word meaning net yield. Another word meaning par value, as well as discount and premium. Accrual rate and yield rate. And I'm going to talk about what these words actually mean in finance. Because I think that there are different of opinions, or should I say that there may or may not still be a degree of illiteracy about what we're talking about when we say we have the highest real yield in DeFi. When we say we're talking about we have the highest real yield in DeFi, we are talking about the incantation witch falls. We are talking about incants reserved against Pyre Phantom state, or Pyre AVAX state, or Pyre BNB state. Does that make sense? It is that ratio. When we are describing yield, literally, if we go up in this Discord chat, there are screenshots of it. This right here. I'm like some examples. In fact, I have this written down in my notebook already, so I'm gonna erase all this. I see Why So Cynical with 3970.7530 over 385,510. Yeah. Does that make sense? Can you guys see this screenshot? Are you guys aware of Why So Cynical's most recent performance in the last epoch? Are you guys familiar with this? Why So Cynical posted a screenshot of this return. This right here is the yield. Does that make sense? Right there. Yep, Jeff has just posted it again. Oh, by the way, Jeff, always great to have you here on Fridays. 3970.75 out of 385,510. This is the yield. This is the yield. Does that make sense? And when the yield is expressed as a percentage. Does that make sense? So if you were to do this math, and we can do that right here with this fancy calculator app. Granted, I want you guys to know that on the UI here, it does like round in the denominator, but again, not really super relevant. 3,970.7530 divided by 385,510, and this right here is 1.03%. Does everyone understand this math? This number right here for Why So Cynical or for whoever is going to probably be slightly smaller than EPR because you're going to end up getting smoldered with your staked amounts. Like the majority of players get smoldered. In fact, only one player likely doesn't get smoldered. Does that make sense? Right? So EPR is always a little bit higher because you have positive yield and negative yield. Does that make sense? The positive yield is the EPR, and the negative yield is your smoldering amount. Does that make sense? Negative yield is what happens as an effect of smoldering. Smoldering is the cause of negative yield. But you don't have a net negative yield unless smoldering outpaces EPR. Does everyone follow me so far? Now, additionally, does everyone understand that Why So Cynical got a 1.03% yield in that epoch? Does everyone understand this math? It's just two variables here, right? You have a input, right? You have a numerator, a denominator, and then you make it a percentage. That's the whole equation. Does that make sense? And this, by the way, is a current yield. And do you guys understand why it's a current? You guys don't know what current yield means. Okay, hang on. First things first. Back to the word numeraire. Oh yeah. So Javery, the Discord got boosted, and now we have emoji rolls again. So now we actually have to. So now we have to. We have to update that. So good news is that we're getting more popular. And the bad news is that we have to configure this. Oh yeah, and you might notice that the Sennyridge Circus has little circus tents next to their name. Yeah, so some of them do at least. Some of them might have pigs. We'll update that later. That doesn't mean anything. But anyways, numeraire. Man, this marker is starting to worry me too. Let me see what I got back here. Yeah, secret stash. Numeraire. Now, can you guys read numeraire here? Is that legible on your screens? Fantastic. So numeraire is like a English word that I think that originates in French. And numeraire means like using a currency as a metric more so than as a medium. Does that make sense? Like when you're talking about like the net worth or the valuation of a company, does that make sense? So if you were going to say that Nvidia has a market cap of $3 trillion, does that make sense? Do you guys understand that this $3 trillion does not actually apply to dollars? Like we're not talking about dollars here. Do you guys understand this is not like dollars are not there? Rather the valuation of the total amount of Nvidia's stock. Okay, so things like this, when you measure something in dollars that isn't dollars, you're using dollars numeraire. You're not using dollars actual. Does that make sense? If you look at like the Forbes Billionaire Index, if you look at Mark Zuckerberg's and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos' net worths, those are also numeraire dollars. Like they're not exactly the same thing as actual dollars. They are not like the instrument itself. Okay. So I want you guys to understand something. Why do I make the claim that PYRESWAP is one of the best dApps or the best dApp for crypto winter? Why do I say things like we don't have crypto winter, we just have big summer and little summer? Do you guys remember my rationale for these statements? Do you guys know why? It has all to do with a frame of reference. Well, Seabiscuit, that's that. Well, that's that. That's that. That's true. But the underlying conceptual reason is PYRESWAP's instruments do not use US dollar as numeraire. You guys are all like in the ballpark. Does that make sense? Because what do we do? What do people describe as crypto summer and crypto winter? They're just relative dollar numeraire prices for things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So like when Bitcoin was like 18 grand, 22 and 23, like the other years, this was arguably a summer price if you were in 2017. In 2017, that was a summer price, but it was a winter price in 2022 and 2023, which is kind of crazy if you fucking think about it. Yeah, the zenith and the azimuth, I think, in that context, Jeff. But yes, exactly. You're correct. Correct. Exactly. The relative wave height, right? Like you think that there's a tall wave until you see a tall wave over there, right? They're relative to each other. They're not really, but what they're relative in is the US dollar. Does that make sense? So crypto winter and crypto summer is still a frame of reference that uses the US dollar as a numeraire. Does that make sense to you guys? So when Bitcoin is pumping, it's pumping with respect to the dollar. When it's crashing with respect to the dollar. Making sense to everybody? Okay. But there's a metric on PYRESWAP and the GPSE that gets used everywhere, and it has nothing to do with the dollar. And this is actually the thing that we use to measure things in. Do you guys know this metric? Yes, correct. Because we don't use the dollar as the numeraire, we use the gas tokens as numeraires. Does that make sense? So one phantom is worth one phantom, whether that's at 3 cents or $3. One AVAX is worth one AVAX, whether that's at $2 or $200. One BNB is worth one BNB, whether that's at $200 or $2,000. Does that make sense? And the tokens, whether we mean DIBs or 2 ohm, 3 ohm, Z ohm, Ribs, Hoggy, Frozen Tomb, Snow Tomb, Affogato, or PYREVAX, PYRBNB, or PYRPhantom, whatever those tokens are at, like that is the determination of our performance. Does that make sense? Like where those ones are at, like how far our tokens are away from that benchmark. But those benchmarks, they're not fixed because all of those tokens have their own volatility. Does that make sense to you guys? So there's a major reason about this, because all the DeFi projects out there that continue to fixate on the dollar as their numeraire, they're still in the orbit of the dollar. Does that make sense? Exactly, J-Reed. Exactly. Correct. They're all still fixated on the dollar because they don't look anywhere else. A lot of people actually do know this. When you want to figure out if a coin is going up or down, you also look to see how it's performing against Bitcoin, because Bitcoin tends to move all projects, as it were. Does that make sense? So there is like this dollar fixation. There's a smaller Bitcoin fixation, but I would say that fixation is maybe like 3% as significant at best. But we don't have either one of those in the GPSC. Does that make sense? Like we orbit entirely around the gas tokens. Does that make sense? At any price. At any price. And because of that, there's two types of ways to like measure yield, okay? But the fact of the matter is, you would never measure yield in crypto the way you would with a stock. Because I think I just kept it over. Okay, right here up top. Okay. I think it's the wrong page, but okay. The fact of the matter is that how is yield calculated? Can you guys see my screen? To calculate yield as securities net realized return, I hate saying the word security here. There are different ways to arrive at securities yield depending on the type of asset and type of yield. For stocks, yield is calculated as the securities price increase plus dividends divided by the purchase price. Does that make sense? For bonds, yield can be analyzed as either cost or current yield. It's current yield, by the way. Do you guys understand why? Because you're in crypto. Like you don't have a frame of reference. Does that make sense? Because you could never calculate any type of yield for real in crypto with a cost yield, because your frame of reference is Bitcoin, which doesn't, like even today, it's up like 4% from what it was yesterday. Does that make sense? You can only ever measure current yield, which is why when we looked at why so cynical before, does that make sense? You can only look at his yield in that exact moment. Does that make sense? Because even if our token was at peg, does that make sense? Even if PYRPhantom was at peg, Phantom is going to move around all over the fucking place. Am I making sense to you guys? Even if PYRPhantom was at peg right now, Phantom would be around all over the fucking place. So you couldn't do cost yield analysis. You can only ever do current yield analysis. If you're attempting to do cost yield analysis in crypto, like you're lost at sea. Yeah. Or you're not really in crypto. So secondly, if you guys saw my screen, we talked about how, generally speaking, in modern finance, it's bonds that have their yield calculated as current, whereas stocks tend to have their yield calculated as cost. Now, these tokens right here, Have you guys heard me refer to these two ever as anything other than debt instruments? Have you guys ever heard me refer to these as anything other than debt instruments? Like saying that these are like a share in a company or anything like that? Do you guys understand? Yeah. This is not stocks. Yeah, this is a decentralized credit union. These are all debt instruments. This is like banking. This is not a stock market. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? They're all debt instruments. They're different configurations of debt. Correct, Maddie. Yes, correct. And if you guys aren't aware, most of the time the word bond is used. I don't use the word bond because tomb forks come with bond tokens and it just makes things weirder. So I say debt instrument as like a hypernym for all of it. Does that make sense? Because the bond is also a debt instrument. 2 ohm is also a debt instrument. I could write 2 bond up here. It's also a debt instrument. 2 ohm is a debt instrument. Pyre Phantom is a debt instrument. Right? They're all, like, cryptocurrencies in general are way closer to things like bonds than they are like stocks. Are you guys aware of this? They do behave extremely volatile. So in traditional finance, things like bonds are very, very non-volatile. They're arguably the most boring sector of finance. But like, yeah, like fundamentally like what they are, like as their concept, much closer to bonds. Does that make sense to you guys? If you keep your focus or fixation on like the dollar price of something, you're not really in DeFi. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like you're still in the orbit of fiat, right? I know that there's USDC, we even have it on the DEX. I know that there's Tether and DAI, we have it on the DEX too. We have US DIBs in Genesis. Does that make sense? Like I get it. Like it provides a value. The stability is its use case. But like that isn't the point of this. If that makes sense? So, you guys understand that these are debt instruments, correct? And when we're measuring yield, we're measuring current yield and net yield. Do you guys understand what I mean when I say net yield? Positive yield minus negative yield. Yep, and arguably, you know, if you subtract a negative, it becomes a positive. But you guys get what I'm saying, right? We would assume that the negative is measured in the positive as well. But you guys get what I'm saying. Okay, so another cool vocab word, by the way, today is par value. And do you know why we're going to talk about par value? Because par value applies to bonds and never to fucking stocks. I mean, maybe it applies to stocks if you buy them OTC or whatever. But par value. Do you guys know what par value is? You're going to understand it. You're going to understand it real quick. Okay, I guess I do have it for stocks. But arguably, it's generally considered for bonds. Okay, like generally bonds deal with par value more. Now, par value is also known as the nominal value or original value. So par value, then you have things like par value is like the benchmark value of a token. So what do you guys think the par value of Pyre Phantom is? Can you guys guess? We don't really call it par value. Yeah, 1 Phantom, exactly. Yeah, there you go, ZeroKex. Yeah, exactly that, Maddie, yeah. Literally 1 to 1, that is the par value. Does that make sense? When you're less than PV, this is referred to as discount, like you're priced at a discount, and when you're greater than PV, this is priced at a premium. Does that make sense? So I want you guys to understand something. When it comes to Pyre Phantom, the yield that you're capturing by exercising it is actually only available when you're at a discount. Does that make sense? Like the yield that you capture when you play the IWV is like the upside of being priced at a discount. Does that make sense? So like when the bond, when the debt instrument is beneath its par value, it provides this service to you. Does that make sense? Because it's an upside of being below its par. Everybody follow me so far? Correct. Maddie, they're all at a discount. Yeah, they're all at a discount, right? Because arguably, Maddie, there would be no point in buying them when they're at a premium, because it's not our goal to take Pyre Phantom all the way to like 10 TWAP. Does that make sense? Like that isn't actually the way this is supposed to work. And by the way, this is why red candles can't kill a project. Does that make sense? Because literally, this is this upside scenario where you being below par value actually has benefit. Does that make sense? And that's why it's so important to get this paradigm through people's heads. Does that make sense? Because it's not that like, oh, red candles don't happen or like red candles might not lose you money, but rather that like the project itself, which is of course the economy of all these debt instruments, doesn't collapse due to being below par value. Even now, like I think Pyre Phantom is like less than 0.01. Yeah, it's like it needs a 300x to get the peg, something like that. Make sense? I'm not scared. I know maybe some of you guys are, but it'll be okay. Arguably, if we didn't get this low, we wouldn't be able to make the claim that we're a 300x project later. But I guess we'll find out. Additionally, if you ever, okay, I had to make up all these like degen terminology words to explain that shit to DeFi users. Does that make sense? I'm not mad about that. Like words like mead and witch vault and stuff like that. That sounds a lot more fun than par value and discount. Does that make sense? Fantastic, Pega. Bravo, Maddie. Okay. Okay. So there's other terms like this. We have accrual rate. And yield rate. Accrual rate, by the way, is the frequency, like the periodicity of time with which you're receiving, what can you guys tell? More money. Making sense? So PYRESWAP provides an accrual rate as high as 4 times daily. Does that make sense? To capture real yield. Making sense? By the way, the real yield in PYRESWAP is not yield that the bearer is entitled to. It's yield that the exerciser is entitled to. Does that make sense? Do you guys know what I mean here? Who is the bearer and who is the exerciser? Yes, correct. Correct, Maddie, once again. Who are the bearers? The bearers is all the holders. Does that make sense? Yeah, the holders, yeah. Yeah, just holding the token in general. Whether they hold it in LP, arguably holding it in LP is a little bit different. But yeah, I would say like just having it in your bag. Like right now, you know, I have a whole bunch. I claimed the missions earlier, by the way, so if you saw the yield go up a lot, it's because the house wallet claimed its emissions, and obviously that's a large chunk sending to gratuity. I normally do that on Friday, in case you guys are wondering. Yeah, does that make sense? Like the yield comes from exercising, not from bearing. Does that make sense? That's different than modern finance. And if you guys don't understand why I do it this way, I mean, we talked about the problems with implementing modern finance stuff into DeFi, right? Like ledger economies, like ledger ecosystems are different in the way their finance works. It's really bizarre that this is the path my life is taking. But like, yeah, these ledgers matter, and they do change the way that finance works on the chain. Does that make sense? If everybody can see what everybody else is doing, it changes things. But yeah, it's the exerciser. The exerciser taking the risk, right? Because there's a risk of smoldering, which, by the way, the bearer doesn't take that risk. Making sense? Okay, so the accrual rate, if you want to actually, measure yield over time, we have on the dashboard, you can see the APR and the DPR as well. But as you guys know, those numbers are just projections of what EPR gets crunched down to. Making sense? However, the accrual rate, if you did want to calculate it, does that make sense? If you were to stake 4 times a day and capture yield 4 times a day, and then average what you basically got 4 times a day over an entire year, you would have an accrual rate of like the average amount of yield you captured out of all, 1,260 epochs or something like that. Whatever 365 times 4 is, it's probably like 14. I can't even do math right now. But yeah, it would be 1460, okay? 1460, assuming 365 days in a year. So the accrual rate is up to 1,460 times a year. Does that make sense? Now, do you guys understand that due to decay being off, right, the accrual rate is actually higher? Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like not just your short-term yield in a second or yield in an epoch, but like the accrual rate is that much better, right? This figure right here gets this metric right here gets an upgrade, right? Yep. Okay. And when we talk about yield rate, we're talking about the same yield equation, right? We just mean yield over time. That's all we mean. Now here's the best part about yield rate. PYRESWAP also has the best yield rate in DeFi. Seabiscuit accrual rate gets upgraded because if you're experiencing decay, like let's say like a fraction amount, why is there a hog next to your name? Pega, this server got boosted because we are much more popular today. So somebody boosted the server, and because they boosted the server, we have emojis back on the rolls. Making sense to you guys? We'll fix the emojis, guys. I promise. That's the next order of business. Yeah, Pega. We had a few dozen people join in the last 24 hours. I wonder why. So, if you were to look at a given year, especially for the fact that we've been in open beta for like 6 months or whatever, you wouldn't really be able to accrue. You wouldn't really be able to accrue yield from the same held position, like an illiquid position. Does that make sense? Like if you have like 100 Pyre Phantom, you would have to get rid of it in an epoch, right? Because you would have decay that would effectively be causing you negative yield, arguably. Does that make sense? Right? So like your accrual rate, it would be difficult for your accrual rate to surpass decay. Does that make sense? Like you could offset decay, but you guys remember before Genesis, we would be buying into the token or you'd meet into the token, right? You guys remember that? You would always enter into the token like, 10 minutes beforehand. You guys remember this? Yeah, exactly. Yep. And by the way, obviously, like I think the game is more fun to play that way. Let's be honest. We'll get back to that. I think when we taper our inflation. Yeah, and of course we want to scale the user base as well. But yeah, so what I mean is when we turn decay off, the potential accrual rate is way higher. Does that make sense? So it's not just the fact that you can get 1% an epoch, right, on whatever the fuck that is, but if you get 1% in a year times 1,460, Here, let's do the math. Let's do the math on the calculator. If you do 1.01 to the power of 1,460, whatever your bag is, in theory, I don't know. Does anyone want to read that number off? Do you guys see that that's like a 2 million X? Granted, this is crazy. This is literally playing 4 times a day for an entire year. So, like, again, you're also not, you know, don't expect that to be realistic. That is just like the ceiling of potential. Yeah, new goal unlocked, yeah. 2 million X you're bagging a year from active staking. Again, let's get there, right? Let's get there. You know, I think some of you would be happy with a 1 million X, okay? Anyways, the yield rate as well. The longest you can measure for yield rate here, like to compare it, would be an epoch, like every 6 hours. Does that make sense to you guys? But the fact of the matter is, active staking doesn't require you to be exposed for an entire epoch, does it? In fact, it almost directly disincentivizes that. Would you guys agree? Yeah, it's almost like when you get a 1% yield, like Why So Cynical did, you might get that in a couple of minutes or less. Exactly, Jeff. A couple of minutes. So if you're measuring it at like 4% a day in real yield, that's still the highest real yield in DeFi. If you're measuring it at 4% over 8 minutes, that is also ridiculously the highest real yield in DeFi. Does everyone understand me? Yield, again, what is it? Right here. Investopedia did a great one. I think it was just, let's see, not back here. I think it's yield versus return. Let's look at this. Yield versus return. Yield and return are not the same thing. Okay? Yield versus return, what's the difference? Yield versus return, an overview. Yield and return are 2 different ways. Okay? The yield is the income and investment returns over time, expressed as a percentage, while the return is the amount of gained over lost. Does that make sense? When you look at return in DeFi, you're probably still going to measure it in the dollar. Do you guys get it? Like, it's like even if you're measuring it as a percentage, you're measuring it as a dollar percentage from wherever you started off. Do you guys get it? You could also go short and you would have positive return. Does that make sense, everybody? The 1% that you guys saw with perception deception and Why So Cynical, this rate of this yield, that size yield is the same whether Pyre Phantom is at 0.003 TWAP or if Pyre Phantom is at 1.003. Does that make sense? Like this type, like the real yield is like a constant. It is set by the market. It's not even in the code. The user base decides it every single round. Did you guys know this? And yet, it's from you guys brainlessly doing it that there still seems to be an arguably really high yield. Isn't that weird? Like, you guys don't coordinate. Some of you have no idea what you're doing. Some of you guys don't even understand it. And yet there's always, consistently, I would say between what? 0.5 point and 2 points of yield every epoch? 4 times a day? Like again, and that's what I mean, Maddie, that like, if Pyre Phantom was up at this price, actually it would need to be below here. Yeah, because it needs to be, hang on. It would need to be below peg, hang on. If Pyre Phantom was at 0.983, does that make sense? Like, that number is the same. Does that make sense? You guys might be a little bit more excitable around this because maybe you guys want to jump in and go arcane or some shit. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Like maybe the arcaneness, the possibility of going arcane makes it more exciting. But in like a default thing, this is the same. And this is also why red candles can't kill the project. Does that make sense? Because you've now literally seen these, right? At least with Pyre BNB. Okay, by the way, guys, Jerome Powell might be giving a speech, or I think he already did give a speech, at Jackson Hole today. Let's take a look at that. Yep. Speech time, is it later today? Okay, look at that. Okay. Everything to expect Friday. Okay, so literally this is the New York Times 1 hour ago. Okay, so Jerome Powell will cut rates on September 18th. Oh man, I'm getting fucking paywalled here. Goodness gracious. At 8 a.m. local time. Okay, we could watch it, but I guess that's not even it. Yeah, from Barron's, they're gonna paywall me so fucking fast. Okay, his remarks all but confirm market expectations. Dovish. Yeah, so do you guys know what this means? Dovish and hawkish? Do you guys know these words? So just like bullish and bearish, hawkish means they raise rates and dovish means they lower rates. Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Hawk of war and dove of peace. Right, and arguably, dovish means that they're like flooding the markets with like liquidity. So it's very interesting that they would call it this way. Like hawkish, dovishness can create inflation, and hawkishness is meant to rein inflation in. But again, well, you know, they just end up like, you know, letting Wall Street decide what fucking bank policy is. Yeah, the chairman says he's ready to lower interest rates, citing a cooling labor market and inflation closing in on the central bank's 2% annual target. Powell is confident that the Fed will successfully thread the needle and deliver a so-called soft landing for the U.S. economy. It would be a rare feat. Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah, what is, like, did you guys know that we haven't even landed yet? Yeah, they're going to deliver a so-called soft landing. Yeah, I think that when I laugh, people get a little nervous because maybe I have like a higher tolerance for this than most people. But yeah, well, Maddie, okay. Here's what's happening. Here's what's happening as far as our inflation and deflation. Let's talk about actually both factors, okay? Hang on. Yeah, all right. Okay, deflation is buying. We'll say Pyre gas, right? Oh, sorry. Inflation is selling here. Sorry. Buying power gas and selling power gas. You guys follow me here? Inflation, minting, and deflation is burning. Yep, Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole indeed. Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So these are the factors that contribute to inflation. Selling power gas and minting power gas. Follow me? And deflation is buying power gas and burning power gas. So we're going to reduce the minting. Reducing the minting is going to reduce the selling. Do you guys understand this? Because if you're most of the power gas getting sold right now is power gas that's getting recently minted. Would you guys agree? Okay, so you guys understand if we reduce minting, by proxy we reduce selling? Now I want you guys to understand something. There may or may not be actors in the Genesis that as soon as APR gets like throttled downwards, they might just completely withdraw and fucking exit their whole bag. Are you guys aware? So that's always a risk we're taking. I doubt we still have those people. Yeah, I think that those people have already been shooken out a little bit, but that's always a risk. Okay? I probably have enemies, you know? So if I have enemies, there might be people in the project just trying to make me look bad. Yeah, exactly, Maddie. Yeah, exactly. That's a great round to play active staking for sure. Yeah, that's a spike in volume. For buying power gas and burning power gas, well, one, we're going to increase the user base. If you guys haven't noticed, somebody boosted the fucking server today, and we have like 30 new people, right? The strategy, I think, is going to work. Like the strategy about just ubiquitous marketing everywhere. By the way, guys, yes, Maddie, that is exactly why you have a pig next to your name. You have that little hoggy next to your name. Because somebody boosted a server. They just learned about this project, I guess. They joined Discord and they said, you know what? I'm going to boost this fucking server. Yep. That's why Jeff has a fucking circus, a tent next to his name. Yep. So a few dozen people are already here. They're lurking. But you know what, guys? I remember when I said about writing good morning and how that helps bring lurkers out. How great is it that somebody who joined the server today already decided it was worth boosting? I wonder who it is. As we increase the user base and we taper emissions, it's harder and harder to acquire power gas without buying it. Additionally, increasing the user base increases the volume because what else are they going to fucking do? You're 100% correct, Maddie. Yeah. Arguably, I think that I have no fucking idea about like Jerome Powell's, rate cut and how that'll affect Bitcoin, because it's also like this is also something that isn't directly adjacent. If Bitcoin rallies around the time of Powell's rate cut, people will assume that that's the reason, but there's always creative narratives in Web3. Okay. Does everyone understand the factors of inflation and deflation? Yeah. So, in order to get deflation higher than inflation, we're going to taper this down. This makes it harder to sell Pyre gas because there isn't so much getting minted. And then, for those of you who don't know, the incantation buys Pyre gas every 4 hours. It's not a huge buy. It's not a huge buy, but it's a little buy. Yeah, it's I think Fexer said it was a 0.5% daily. That's probably an average or something. Granted, it's going to vary with volatility and volume and stuff like that. Yes, Electronic, our server got boosted due to our amazing user-based growth strategy working out. So, since the server's been boosted, we now have a banner image again. So we got to clean up that logo because this is not the Piggyfy server anymore. Exactly. Did you guys see the stickers? Yeah, Maddie, I definitely have images for that. I literally did not know that it happened until like 10 minutes. Yeah, thanks. I literally didn't know that I didn't know that it happened until like 10 minutes before this live stream. Okay, by the way, guys, I officially have a shirt now that says, "Does that make sense?" I may or may not debut it at a surprise. I may or may not debut it sometime over the next week on one of these shows. It does, in fact, say that. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah. Yeah, bullish. I am definitely, calling that an investment. You guys get what I'm saying? That's how you guys know my money's where my mouth. Jeff, I think that yeah. Okay, they want stickers. Okay. Well, I'll say this. We've determined that wherever the fuck I buy stickers from is overpriced, and that in Russia you can buy them for like 1/6 the cost, and I think in Turkey you can buy them for like 1/4 the cost. So like, I bought these from Sticker Mule, and I have like way more for sure. This is like only 50 here, and I think we have like 500 so far. And I think like I told you guys, it's this sticker, but a Turkish version of this. We're gonna have 2,000 of these in like 8 different cities in Turkey. They're getting distributed, and they're gonna get they're gonna get pictures taken for the stickers in Turkey. Yeah. Yep. Oh, by the way, guys, did you know we're gonna make it? Because we're slowly building this group of people that is just so capable of doing so many different things and really moving the needle. Do you guys know what I mean? It's all coming together. Jeff, yeah, I don't expect merch anytime soon because I feel like that is I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we could make. Yeah, I don't fucking know. I think that you can make it a thing. I have no idea if you can order them like singles, you know? I'm definitely not planning merch. I need to make the project work, you know? I don't think a professor would eat a toothpick. Pega, this show is the latest in the day, and what I ate is in fact making me want a toothpick. But I want you to know that I used to smoke cigarettes. Yeah, this is Casual Friday, so I have a toothpick. But yeah, I used to smoke cigarettes, and yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going for the whole wise guy look, you know? I'm gonna start talking like with a fake lisp. Yeah, Razor Ramon, indeed. A great wrestling reference. By the way, you guys know this word? Nobody? Can I get screen share? In professional wrestling, kayfabe is the portrayal of staged events within the industry as real or true, specifically the portrayal of competition, rivalries, and relationships between participants as being genuine and not staged. The term kayfabe has evolved to also become a code word of sorts for maintaining this reality within the direct or indirect presence of the general public. Kayfabe in the United States often is the suspension of disbelief that is used to create the non-wrestling aspects of promotions, such as feuds, angles, and gimmicks, in a manner similar to other forms of fictional entertainment. In relative terms, a wrestler breaking kayfabe would be likened to an actor breaking character on camera. Since wrestling is performed in front of a live audience, whose interaction with the show is crucial to its success, kayfabe can be compared to the fourth wall in acting, since hardly any conventional fourth wall exists to begin with. Because of this lack of conventional fourth wall, wrestlers were once expected to maintain their characters even out of the ring, and in other aspects of their lives that can be made public. In general, everything in a modern professional wrestling show is to some extent scripted or kayfabe, even though at times it is portrayed as real life, whereas once portrayed as real rivalries being conveniently settled by unscripted wrestling matches. Okay, I guess I don't want to ruin the illusion that wrestling's fake. But the point being is, in Web 3, in my opinion, there is also kayfabe. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And Jeff has his own GIF for the Undertaker coming back from the dead. Oh my God. You know what's crazy is that Jeff did all this before AI. Yeah, like before AI would put his face on every single GIF, he was doing it old school with like a poking needle type of tattoo type of business. Yeah, he was doing it old school with incandescent light bulbs and everything. Yep, stick and tap. Yeah, exactly. All right. Yeah. Anyways, to be clear. Yeah. Okay. Good point. All right. Yeah. So we'll be wrapping it up. Do you guys have any questions? Any questions? By the way, does everyone understand the highest real yield in DeFi? Do you guys get it? Like, there's plenty of stuff that we could exaggerate about. This is not one of them. Anyways, thank you guys so much for coming to the PYRESWAP show. I'm getting zoomed in on. Fantastic. This is exactly the way I want to end the week. Zoomed in. Thank you guys so much. And yes, we are going to make it. Have a great rest of your weekend. See you on Sunday.